is going on, everybody? Welcome into a special edition of the Daily Energy Newsbeat Stand-Up Weekly Recap here on this gorgeous Saturday, September 23rd, 2023. As always, I'm your humble correspondent, Michael Tanner, coming to you from an undisclosed location here in Dallas, Texas. As always, joined by the executive producer of the show, the purveyor of the show, and the director and publisher of the world's greatest website, energynewsbeat.com, Stuart Turley. My man, how we doing today?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and we had an absolute blast this week with everything, Michael.
I mean, it was a big week. Nothing like you're going to make fun of the EIA. You're going to dig in a little bit on Jerome Powell. You're going to talk about electric battery tanks and, a couple shots at BP CEO Bernard Looney can't hurt.
No.
What should people, what was the biggest thing you saw this week?
Well, I'll tell you what, getting to see whether or not Jerome Powell actually knew what he was talking about when he actually sits back and says the American lower income folks are doing just fine by putting all of their bills on their credit card at 26%. He thinks that's okay.
Load them up, baby. Load them up. Speaking of, we got to talk credit card bills after this.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have our own Energy Newsbeat credit card.
Yes. We're ICOing the thing, initial coin offering. So you get ENB coins, you send us dollars. It's a sweet thing. But we have a great show lined up for you guys. All of our top stories from the week. We appreciate you checking us out. We will be back on Monday to bring you the top stories from over the weekend and get you prepped for the week. But until then, guys, we'll see you. I'm giving up to the weekly recap.
California sues oil giants, alleging climate risks deception. This is about as dumb as it gets. Let me come on down here, and the deception is just horrible. Rob Bonta, the California attorney, Michael, filed this, and he filed it against, we're talking a who's who of the oil companies, targeted ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, ConocoPhillips, and Chevron. And it's because of the deceptions that our oil and gas are hiding the fact of how bad fossil fuels are. Let's get a quote from him. Oil and gas company executives have known for decades that reliance on fossil fuels would cause these catastrophic results, but they suppress that information from the public and policymakers by actively pushing out the disinformation on the topic. Read the 135-page complaint. It caused a delay to global warming response. Michael, I'm going to call hoo-ha on this. This is not only hoo-ha. I would swear if this wasn't a family show, this is about as kind of like an OU graduate, if you would. Have you seen that meme where that little girl is crying? Or it's actually a short, and the little girl's crying, and he goes, "Dad called me a Democrat." Okay.
I've seen that. That's funny.
Okay.
What I think is interesting is this. So this lawsuit is, as Stu mentioned, is alleging that they've, quote, downplayed the risk posed by fossil fuels. Who are those companies target? Exxon, Shell, BP, ConocoPhillips, Chevron. What I find interesting is that BP, for all of the green push that they've done, and we talked about it ad nauseum last week with the news of their CEO stepping down due to some unpronounced relationships. But What was the goal when he took over in 2016? They were going to become beyond petroleum. They were going to move and really push that renewables forward. And guess what? For all that hard work, for all that investment, guess what? When it comes to being looped into what really is just a vanity lawsuit, like this is just to get headlines, this is just for the press release, they still get looped into it. Imagine being in investor relations at BP. You got to think, what more can we do? You outside of abandoning oil and gas altogether, there's nothing you can do. So take note if you're an oil and gas company. You can do everything right. You can placate the ESG people. And guess what? When it comes down to it, they're still going to loop you in with everybody else because it's not a serious discussion. That's what I took out of this.
Oh, absolutely. And what we're seeing is like the climate scientist that just admitted that he fraudulently did everything, to get his reports. So there's fraud on both parts. I disagree with this 100%. Just for the same
Shocker.
reason.
Stu and I disagree with this one. I know everyone was
Wait a minute. Yeah.
was on hands and knees wondering, where do they come down on this climate lawsuit?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I need to get my defibrillator out because, I'm shocking myself here.
All right.
Legislature approves plan allowing California to buy power paid with more surge charges to consumers.
Of course.
Michael, just as a tee up on what this is, Governor Newsom, the pretty boy of politics, he is setting it up for permission to buy massive amounts of electricity to avoid blackouts. And Michael, it's going to be from neighboring states. Are you ready? By natural gas and coal.
Perfect.
I mean, we're talking things that they have been trying to avoid, but because they have gone, as Jay Young would say, greener, they have just totally gone into the solar and wind, highest energy costs in the U.S. 5 companies, roughly, Michael, they paid $750 million to lease areas off the California coast. Here's what the problem is. Those projects could generate enough electricity for 3.5 million homes. They can't get them connected. Oops.
$750 million just to lease land. I mean,
right.
And you think oil and gas leasing is expensive, where you hear words like 10,000 an acre, 20,000 acre, and things go crazy. But I want to know what the per acre cost of that is. This could go down $750 million just to lease land. Is this not just a government scheme to grab money? Because like, ooh, we're just going to auction off all this leases that we know no one's going to actually build on, because it's once they actually do the math.
Right.
Who's underwriting these deals? I'd love to see that financial model.
We're going to talk about that in some of the next stories here. This one kind of gets me all worked up. When you sit back and say, excuse me, California has moved quickly to end its reliance on fossil fuels in recent years. State regulatory have banned the sale of most new gas-powered cars in 2035, but the state struggled. Michael, they're still using 70% of the oil drilled in the rainforest, drilled by China. They're destroying the rainforest, and they are energy hypocrisy is alive and well. All right.
Yeah, what do you expect from California?
Oh yeah. I'll tell you, I like my haircut better than Newsom's. It's faster in the shower. For our podcast listeners, I got a flesh colored hairline. Here's 10 red flags of warning for looming recession. This one is very interested. It came from The Messenger by Al Lewis. Very uncertain economic outlook. Let's see. The outlook remains highly uncertain, said the folks at the conference board. The index is based off of 10 components ranging from stock prices and interest rates to unemployment claims and consumer expectations for business conditions. So let's come down into here. Consumers are not buying big ticket purchases. I guess Biden economics is working here, so you got to love that one. We saw some switch even to some canned products like canned chicken and canned tuna and things like that. Costco's chief financial officer, Richard Galani, told analysts on a May conference call. That's huge in itself right there. Going to canned food instead of eating chicken because of the pricing. Regarding banks, outlook for the second half of 2023, banks reported expecting further tightening of standards of all loan categories. How does that impact? That impacts the car loans, so that the car dealers are in trouble. We already know the EVs are in trouble, and they're really piling up on the lots. The housing industry with the higher rates, they're having some serious problems moving houses. And then you have commercial real estate because of the people leaving the blue cities and blue states. I believe New York City is around that 45% to 50% commercial vacant. So you have some hard things coming around the corner. Goldman Sachs says that 1.8 trillion in corporate debt is coming due over the next 2 years and will have to be refinanced at higher interest rates. Holy smokes. Recessions occur as debt levels peak and borrowers begin to default. Guys, these are some serious problems coming around the corner. Here's another one. This is the ISM Manufacturing Purchasing Manufacturers Index. Orders are, in fact, falling faster than factories are cutting output. The other side effect of all this is we have a world global slowing economic forecast because of energy. The number one problem is energy and printing money. We cannot print money to pay for renewables that won't pay for the technology in order to get, Robert Bryce says it best when he talks about the energy density. Go follow Robert Bryce, buy all of his books. He is an outstanding source for information. Inflation is sticky and the Fed isn't done. Here's the last one that I'm going to deal on this one. The only way, and I have been trolled on this a lot, the only way that I feel that we are going to get inflation under control is reduce the energy cost to consumers. Reduce the interest rate so that business can afford capital and they can start reinvesting into it. Get rid of the horrific regulations that are now, the legislation through regulations is going on right now. And I didn't vote for all these regulations coming through, and it is starting to really hurt all U.S. citizens. So the only way out, lower energy costs and go through these other steps. You don't do that. You cannot do any of these other steps without lowering energy costs, and it won't happen. So, buckle up. We are in for some interesting times here. David Blackman, Monday's energy absurdity of the day. Ford CEO prioritizes EV transition over employee demands amid the UAW strike. Michael, I got tickled at this one. I love David Blackman, but I want to ask you something. The Ford CEO, his name is Jim Farley. Do you think that he ever did an imitation at a Christmas party of the Chris Farley of the consultant in a van down by the river? Could you imagine the CEO of Ford going, I can bet you live in a van down by the river? I would pay money for that one. Okay, let's jump onto this story here.
It's what he looked like on CNN last week.
That's exactly where I was going. Okay, here we are. In an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper last week, Farley left no room for doubt that his company's pursuit of government subsidies for the ongoing EV transition far outweighs any real concerns about the company's employees. Okay, here's the thing. Bidenomics, which we'll cover here in a second, Biden's EV rebates have caused so many people heartburn. They have a new hotline for help. 1-800 I don't understand Biden's EV policies. And let's go here. Several weeks ago, Ford plans to lose $4.5 billion on its EV unit in 2023, Michael. That's sustainable.
They're losing $67,000 per car sold in the EV unit.
Yep. And he says, while the company wasn't opposed to wage increases, the double-digit range, going to 40% would put the company out of business, and he would not cut Ford's push for EVs, even though the company is expecting to lose $4.5 billion this year alone. Here's a quote from him. There is a fine line that we won't go past, which is we want everyone to participate in our success, Farley said. But if it prevents us from investing in this transition to EVs and future products like the one we have now, the new Ford 150, best-selling vehicle in the world, in the U.S., then everybody's job is at risk if we don't invest.
And remember, this is important because the United Auto Workers Association is striking right now. The big three, GM, Ford, and Stellantis, or whichever one that owns Jeep and Chrysler, they're all striking right now. They want 40% wages. At first, that sounds outrageous. It's probably way too high. I mean, not way too high. It's probably a little high, but you have to take into account that's over a 4-year business plan or a 4-year span. That's including inflation. So if you include the inflation that we're dealing with right now, it's really like a 10 to 15% raise. But the fact of the matter is, Ford is giving them has laid out 10 or like a 22% raise on the fact that they're losing $4.5 billion on EVs. So I love David Backman's point here. They are willing to pour money at a losing proposition in order to line their pockets, which is a quote that I'm about to read here, line their pockets with government subsidies while the workers eat it in the shorts. This is exactly how the frame of it is going. President Sean Fan, he wrote this as an op-ed. He's the president of the UAW. He says, quote, "We will not let the EV industry be built on the backs of workers making poverty wages while CEOs line their pockets with government subsidies." I can get behind that one, Stu.
I can too. I'll tell you, the whole thing about this is I want the union workers to build a Ford 150 van for Farley so that he can go down there and say, I live in a van down by the river, and have him try to negotiate there. I just find it appalling that we're here now because we should go to hybrids rather than EVs until the technology is there. You're not going to go there. Biden's policies have put us in this situation. In fact, today, Michael, the unions asked Biden not to help out and negotiate this deal.
Can you blame him?
No, I don't want Biden to help. I hope Biden retires early.
I wouldn't want Biden's help making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
No, I would want nothing. Rishi Sunak, he's the prime minister over in the UK, announces U-turn on key green targets. Michael, can you hear this?
Yep, I've got this.
Pow, 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 pow. Those are all the green heads blowing up, and pow, pow, pow. All these heads are just exploding.
Yep.
Okay. He announced a major U-turn in the government's climate commitments as he promised to put his party on a more radical path in an attempt to close the gap with Labor before the general election. What he's doing is several key moves, and let's get down into the meat here. He says, I've got an opportunity to change things, and what I don't want to do is make another short-term decision, easy ways out, and ultimately not be straight with the country at what those mean for them. If we continued just a hair more, if we continue down this path, we risk losing the consent of the British people. The resulting backlash would not just be against specific policies, but the wider mission itself, meaning we might never achieve our goal. I got to hand it to him. He is going in, and one of the biggest things that he's doing is way down in the bottom of the article. He's also rolling back the sale of ICE cars or internal combustion engine cars, so that it's going to add another, I believe, 3 or 4 years on it. And so he's trying to extend that out. The average person cannot afford the EVs. I mean, we talked about that yesterday with the strikes going on in the U.S. This is really going to change things. And when you sit back, the last thing in here, prices in the UK for energy, Michael, when somebody is actually having to pay their electric bill or eat, that's where they are right now in the UK. So do politicians want to get reelected, or do they want to get mugged by the people? Let's see, reelect, and then you're going to see that. This is part of the ESG movement that is now collapsing. And so the investors started it and saying, we need our money. And then now the politicians in the UK are going, we can't pay for this.
Well, because I mean, amongst all of these rollouts, the one that has everybody up in arms is the sale of EVs, or the phasing out of petrol diesel vehicles, as they call it in the UK, from 2030 to 2035. So it's really only 5 years. I mean, heads are exploding over really just a 5-year rollback. That's what I think's the craziest part about this. Everyone's freaking out. Didn't really do anything other than say, hey, we're going to give ourselves more time to achieve this goal. Move the goal to allow us to actually realistically hit it. I mean, again, I would have gone farther. You know, you got to remember, this came after a pretty crazy 24 hours. You have to remember, he was going to announce this in a planned speech, but it was leaked to the press. So he had to basically announce this 48 hours sooner than he would like to, because in the UK, the way their government works, the cabinet still needs to sign off on this.
Right. Well, this is just like New York City when you and I, and New York when you and I were talking yesterday. All those in favor, let's go ahead and cut all petroleum products and oil and gas out of New York. All those in favor? Okay. Yeah, we're in. Cut them off. And it's the same thing with the UK. It's now done. Anyway, it's the same thing with the UK. This is almost like Brexit, in that they are now admitting that they have a problem. And if you want to go ahead and get there, they need natural gas, they need less renewables, and they need to keep their cars because they can't afford the batteries.
Okay. Absolutely. Electric batteries on tanks. Gotta love it.
Oh, U.S. Army electric tanks on hold as battery technology develops. You can't buy this kind of entertainment. And, you know, do you remember 4 months ago or so, we had that, maybe even 5 months ago, we had the solar panels going on to onto tanks. There's some technology and physics involved in this. Let's go through this here in a sec. Army needs 20-fold increase in battery charging. Let me give you some numbers here. There are no EVs deployed in the battlefield, because right now, Michael, if you park in a electric bike into your apartment, they blowed up. I mean, like Larry the Cable Guy would go, that just blowed up the whole apartment. They're not gonna, I mean, you hit a shell or a 22 round at a tank, it will blow up. All right. Let's go in here, and it says, the technology challenges mean not a single all-electric fighting vehicle is currently deployed in the field. Really?
But don't worry, the Defense Department is hoping intense interest in scaling up batteries for consumer and utilities will lead to breakthroughs. Newsflash, probably won't.
No. Okay. To charge a 50-ton tracked combat vehicle inside the Army's preferred envelope of 15 minutes, soldiers would need a 17-megawatt charging station, more than 20 times bigger than the largest mobile generator the Army currently has. Do you know how much diesel you got all to the front line to charge these tanks?
Do a lot, yeah.
Okay, which came first? You bring the charging thing, and then you bring all the tankers to charge it, and then they said, oh, this is safer for the men because they won't have to deal with the fuel, the very volatile fuel. Hogwash. I mean,
Here's my thing. If you could actually come up with a battery that stored more, in theory, this Army Lieutenant Governor, this Lieutenant General Ross Kaufman, who says this, he uses the phrase ideally, and I agree with him. Ideally, you would be able to go all electric because of the benefits. The problem is we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world, and we live in reality. And unfortunately, reality and physics still mean something.
Oh, yeah. And now, when you sit back and take a look, we have to be mindful of equipping our sons and daughters of this nation with something that's going to be reliable and useful in the battlefield. All right.
Yeah.
Leave that one alone.
I know what's going to be useful in the battlefield, not batteries.
No. Would you? Okay, Michael, when you've got a 50-ton tank and you add 48 tons of battery to make that 50-ton tank work, you got a 90-ton piece of crap driving around. You think it's going to get through the mud and the Russian snow? Heck no.
It's going to end up in some battery graveyard in the middle of Africa.
Oh, yeah. And the kids are going to get to mine it, and it's going to, kill all the elephants. Oh, yeah. It's horrible.
Hey, now it's going to move from saving the whales to saving the elephants. I think you've identified the next ground for PETA. Save the elephants, folks.
They call me the people's man, the Popel.
The Popel. Pope Stu, we appreciate it.